You're tuned in, tuned up, and ready to go. Welcome to Ria's Ham Shack, a weekly conversation about amateur radio, shortwave listening, and radio tech, hosted by Ria Jairam, N2RJ, and heard weekly on WRMI Legends Shortwave. And now, here's your host, Ria.
Well, what a week it's been, and are you ready for the weekend? I guess that is the question. You know, I will talk about the week. I will talk about what I did this week. Yes, I have tendered my resignation to the ARRL. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to reflect on some of my past moments and some of the things I have done and some of the things I could do better. Some of the things they could do better. Also, we'll take your questions and answer them. We'll also talk about the news. We'll talk about DX, and we'll talk about a whole bunch of other ham radio and radio related things. Would like to give a shout out to, of course, the folks who make this possible. That is the fabulous WRMI Legends. You can go on to WRMILegends.com and see how you can support the station and support the legends and keep the legends on the air, keep the tubes glowing, and keep the power pumping out. Ted Randall, Holly, and of course the crew at WRMI, Jeff White and his crew down there in Okeechobee, Florida, bring you this program every week right here on WRMI Shortwave. If you're not a listener, why don't you check us out? And you can also check us out on WRMILegends.com. I am Ria Jairam, N2RJ, as you know, and that's my call sign. We talk about amateur radio and radio tech on this show, and I love doing it for you. But first, let's take a break. We don't have any sponsors. Well, maybe not yet. Word from our fine, sponsors, me, I guess, or whoever else. We're coming right back. So in case you didn't know, Ria's Ham Shack is on YouTube, and you can go to youtube.com/@N2RJ. That's a YouTube channel where you can find a lot of great video content that's a companion to this radio show. You'll find the weekly Live with Ria streams. You'll find my general class licensing videos. You'll also find other interesting videos, news, tips, tricks, and how to get the most out of your amateur radio and other types of radio. I talk about GMRS, I talk about FRS, I talk about MERS, CB radio, whatever kind of radio. Even I talk about the FCC and the FAA and the kind of trouble they're getting into, okay, right here on Ria's Ham Shack. Yes, we are Ria's Ham Shack. youtube.com/@N2RJ, youtube.com/@N2RJ. So I know you've heard a lot about the politics of the ARRL, and you've heard a lot of things, so I wouldn't bore you with that. I'll tell you that straight up, yeah, I had to call it quits this week. Not prompted by anything that the league was doing this week. I just felt that I needed to move on, and I was presented with a new opportunity to make great things in amateur radio. I remember, this is not for my benefit. I'm actually going to be, doing some great work for the community, because this is the community I love. For my benefit, I have a job. I have a great job, actually, and I put my efforts into that to basically pay my bills. But amateur radio, the ARRL, it was for the community. I started off actually at a very tumultuous time in the league's history, where the league was seeing some of essentially the main issue at that time was the censure of a director, Dick Norton, N6AA, and people going up to Dayton and wearing these buttons saying, "I support N6AA," and all sorts of stuff. And they began talking about the censure was unjust and unfair, and it was, and it definitely was. But eventually, we got 4 out of 5 directors replaced, and I was one of them who ended up being elected to replace a sitting director. And that was a very momentous time in the history of the board. I don't think there's been any time where they had essentially that kind of turnover in one election cycle. Of course, you know my history with the whole issue where I was accused of things, and and then a lot of back and forth and such like that. At the same time, I still maintain that I did nothing wrong, and I did nothing wrong. Okay, but anyway, I felt that it was time to change. But I'll reflect on some of my highlights in the league. I was a very strong voice for basically the members, and this is who I care about in the league. I care about the members, and the members need to know what's going on. And I was very candid with people about the affairs of the league. What I could tell them, I did tell them. What I could not tell them, I told them I couldn't tell them. There are some things that are off limits, like personnel issues and such like that. One of the things we did was we hired a new CEO, and this person is the current CEO. And you'll hear a lot about him here. I just couldn't, I'll tell you something. It's quite interesting to me how this whole turn of events is. But that said, I had a lot of fun going to various clubs, knowing various people, going to various hamfests and such like that, and generally being as attentive to the needs of my members in my division and to members in general of the ARRL and to radio amateurs, because I love this hobby and I love this. I love amateur radio. I might not agree with everything, but I enjoy amateur radio. And I will continue to enjoy amateur radio. And to give you a sneak peek of what's next, the organization I'm going to be ending up with, they do a lot of great things for amateur radio. And they do a lot of great things outside of amateur radio. They also are very involved in certain aspects of amateur radio that are unconventional. So I'm very much looking forward to everything that they do, but you'll have to find that out next week. And of course, I'm always available here on this radio show. I'm going to continue doing this radio show. This is a great, medium to tell people about things. I'm really glad that this audience is growing. My last show talking about the FCC, boy, did that get some views. I'll tell you that the FCC, whenever we talk about the FCC, that's always a hot topic. So I think I'll probably talk about it on YouTube. But anyway, the FCC actually is holding some consultations for Spectrum, and they're going to be talking about the future of Spectrum. Frankly, the future of amateur Spectrum I don't see is very positive when it comes to useful bands such as the microwave bands, because those will probably be repurposed for commercial use because, money talks and everything else walks. And I do think that, quite frankly, that commercial interests will tell us that, we need more spectrum for this and that. I do like what ICOM is doing, where they are providing equipment for the lesser used bands. And I do think that when the ICOM 905 comes out, I might try to buy one. We'll see how that goes. But that's pretty great. I think that they're taking positive steps. And other radio manufacturers too. I see the other radio manufacturers that produce equipment, they need to definitely help us use our underutilized bands so that they don't become underutilized. Because remember, we had this issue back in, I think it was last year or the year before, where France proposed taking away the 2-meter band. That one was brazen, I think. I think that any country trying to do that, any leader of any country trying to do that should have their head examined. 2 meters is one of those bands you just don't touch, because amateurs worldwide are using it. And I go back to my service at the ARRL. It was nice being on the inside of those discussions. But one thing I always wanted to do was serve on the executive committee, and I guess nobody ever voted for me there. Oh well, but that's that. I always was attentive to members and their needs and such like that, and also the general health of our hobby. You know, our hobby is strong. I think the politics aside, we do have a strong, vibrant amateur radio community. I do think it'll persevere on. I do think some things will change. So let's shift gears a little bit. We'll talk about the D-Expeditions. I just worked Sable Island, and I think at the time of this recording, they're actually still on Sable Island because their flight keeps getting delayed because of weather on Sable Island from Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I worked them on CW, that's Morse code. I worked them on single sideband, which is phone telephony. And I also worked them on the FT8 mode. You know, one guy in Greece actually called it funny transmission mode. I have to laugh. You know, he's sour and salty about this, but there are a lot of hams who their experience with ham radio comes down to FT8, because without FT8 for them, there would be no ham radio. And that's the way I see it. Now, I did work them once on FT8 because I wanted to get the digital mode. I tried on RTTY. I'm just not a big fan of RTTY radio teletype because, you know, you have to set it up and you have to go and tinker with your settings. And in my radio, I use audio frequency shift keying, where the radio generates tones and then it produces the RTTY tones. But generally, I didn't take part in that. But I noticed a lot of D-Expeditions are actually doing the FT8 modes, quite a lot of FT8, because quite frankly it's easy, one, and then two, the automation that Joe Taylor has built in to the WSJTX software enables them to work a lot of people and put them in the logs, so essentially make a lot of contacts very quickly. And when you're on a rare island, when you're on a rare place in a rare D-Expedition, you want to be able to put as many people in the log as possible. So that's why they're doing FT8. Of course, they still have to do the traditional modes like CW, Morse code, and single sideband, because there are actually separate DXCC awards for those. I have DXCC on all three modes, on CW, Morse code, and phone, right, where you're talking with your voice, and also on digital. So that's how it goes. Okay, well, you know, I hope you worked a good DX and you enjoyed it. And next week I'll probably talk about where my next chapter is going to be. But first we're going to take a break and we will be right back with the news. So, you know, one of the great things about having an HF radio is the ability to work DX. But you need to know where you can find this DX, and you can actually find all the latest news, tips, tricks, scuttlebutt, and on-the-scene reports at dx-world.net. That's dx-world.net. My friend Call and his fabulous crew of correspondents bring you all the latest DX news from around the world right into your ham shack. Okay, so check out dx-world.net, and they also supply the news here on Ria's Ham Shack. So if you want to get the source of the news, you go to dx-world.net. That's dx-world.net. Okay, let's dive into the news, and this news is from dxworld.net, dx-world.net for all your DX news. FO/AA7JV, Marquesas and Tumotu. So he is now in Tikehau Atoll on the Tumotu group, grid BH55 and OC066. He's going to have 3 stations and 2 radios in a box on a nearby Motu small island. The entire D-Expedition was landed on the radio in a box boat in minutes, all wired up with complete stations in these radio in a boxes. And 2 stations they're running remotely, operated on FT8, and one's a full power 160-10 CW/SSB station that they work locally from the boat via 900 megahertz bridge. Now, if you look on the DX World website on their bulletin, I actually saw this. This is pretty interesting, and you can see on it here they have the radio in a box on wheels. They have some antennas, and they have the antennas on the beach, and they have a Starlink dishy, I guess, so they have Starlink internet. That's going to be real interesting. So this, I think, is one of the ways you're going to see DXpeditions going in the future, where they use these radios in a box. You can actually see it. This is in the weekly World DX Bulletin on dx-world.net. It's written by Bjorn ON9CFG. 9G4X Ghana. So for the past 3 days, in addition to our 9G4X operations, we've been joined by 18 Ghanaians, all seeing a DXpedition, perhaps amateur radio itself, for the first time. And 17 of their visitors from Ghana's National Communication Authority, their government's equivalent of the Federal Communications Commission in the U.S. They're here to learn about amateur radio in the hopes there will be opportunities to promote the hobby in a country with less than a handful of active licensed amateur operators against a population of about 33 million. Wow, that's crazy. But I guess, you kind of understand it. I mean, in some of these poorer countries, they can't afford radio equipment that foreigners might bring. And I remember how it was for me in Trinidad and Tobago. I couldn't afford radio equipment. And amateur radio was the last thing that I was able to do fully. When I came to America and I make American dollars, I'm able to buy American ham radio equipment. Well, Japanese ham radio equipment. All right. Let's see. dx-world.net/9G4X-Ghana. CY0S Sable Island. And they have approximately 78,089 QSOs in log contacts. And of course, due to the weather, they did not take down any antennas, and they're going to be waiting word from Parks Canada, Sable Aviation, Vision Air Services. So that's good. They are really pumping them out. They're really cranking them out. Okay, really cranking them out. There's a lot of other DXpeditions. There's D4 Capo Verde. There's E6 Niue. They're going to be E6AF and E6CI. There's Balearic Islands, Guadeloupe, Mayotte, New Caledonia. Of course, the Marquesas Island. Solomon Island, he's going to be on H44MS until May 8th. Panama, my friend Phil McBride, VA3QR. He's the president of the Radio Amateurs of Canada. He is operating from Panama during the month of March. And he's active on SSB and digital modes, QSL via his home call. He's going to be HP1 stroke VA3QR, HP3 stroke VAQR, and HP8 stroke VA3QR. Vatican City, look for HV0A on April 2nd, operation on HF using CW. QSL via IK0 FVC, logbook of the world. I guess that's a nice Easter gift for us, right? Yeah, and then you have JD1 Minami Torishima. Take JG8 NQJ is once again operating during the spare time until mid-May as call/JD1. He's using CW with some FT8. I still have to work them. I don't have that country. So you have Sin Martin, PJ7A until April 1. T30 Western Kiribati and T33KC, and they're going to be there. T33KC is already in Tarawa, so he's going to be T30UN DXpedition. Cool stuff. Lot of stuff here. You have their whole DXpedition timeline. Check them out at dx-world.net. So shifting gears a little bit, I talked about AM radio in a Tesla and how you can actually get AM radio with no problems in a Tesla and other electric vehicles. My congressman, my representative in my district, Josh Gottheimer, he actually went in front of a Tesla dealership, well, not dealership, the Tesla service center in Paramus, New Jersey, and he gave a speech about how we need to preserve AM radio in cars, and he's going to mandate it as safety equipment. I want to see AM radio kept in cars. I don't know how successful he'll be with mandating it as safety equipment. Like I said, I think there is some other motive besides the electromagnetic interference, but that certainly is a concern, but it's not as big a concern as you think. AM radio has a lot of value. So he actually said that how they would there would be some national emergency problems, meaning that you're not able to receive emergency broadcasts if you don't have AM radio. You can kind of do it on FM, but AM radio goes far and wide, and AM has simple equipment to do it. So that's my Congressman Josh Gottheimer from the 5th District of New Jersey. And now shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about special events here. This is from the RSGB in celebration of the 25th anniversary of the establishment of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region in the People's Republic of China. On the 1st of July 1997, Hong Kong licensed amateurs are granted the use of the special prefix VR25 until the 30th of June 2023. The VR2 Contest Club and the Hong Kong Amateur Radio Transmitting Society will be using VR25 CC and VR25 HK respectively. So very nice to hear Hong Kong. Hong Kong, even though it's part of China, it's a special administrative region. I believe you don't need a visa. If you're American, you don't need a visa to go to Hong Kong. And if you are going to mainland China, however, you are required to. But it is nice to celebrate 25 years. And we'll see how that goes. The SPDX contest is coming up on Saturday, the 1st of April, and runs until 1500 UTC on Sunday and the 2nd of April. Using CW and SSB on the 160 to 10 meter bands where contests are permitted. The exchange is signal report and serial number. Okay, and Polish stations will send their province code. That's good. I always enjoy that contest, working the Polish stations. And it was, I worked a lot of them. It seems to be popular here. We have a lot of Polish Americans here who, want to get in touch with their heritage. And some who are recent immigrants who just want to talk back home. Really cool stuff. Okay. So here's an article from Hackaday about vintage telephones. Cold War military telephones now usable thanks to DII switch build. They talk about a telephone called the TA-1042. It's a digital military telephone from the 1980s, but it's non-functional unless it's hooked up to the military phone switches it was designed to work with. They're really only useful these days as a heavy object to throw at somebody, and unless you had the suitable supporting hardware. So the project here is a proprietary switching protocol on a Raspberry Pi Pico. The microcontroller's unique programmable I/O subsystem proved perfect for a task, and they were able to, with a little hat, to interface with the hardware, they're able to get the TA-1042 by the digital non-secure voice terminal equipment. So really interesting stuff. You can check it out at hackaday.com. They have a whole bunch of different articles, but that's really, 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 really cool stuff. And they have a lot of ham radio activities too as well. And here's an interesting story about a grant for a university ham radio station. Physics professor Nathaniel Frizzell, PhD, call sign W2NAF, he received a $196,241 grant from Amateur Radio Digital Communications for a new ham radio station. So a new amateur ham radio station planned for the University of Scranton's Amateur Radio Club through support from a nearly $200,000 Amateur Radio Digital Communications grant awarded to Nathaniel Frizzell, PhD, who is an assistant professor of physics and engineering at the University of Scranton. The grant will support antenna systems and state-of-the-art equipment to allow HF, VHF, UHF, and microwave operations, including amateur satellite operations. The new station will be located in the glass wall study room 596 on the 5th floor of the Loyola Science Center, with additional lab space on the same floor. The station will give students a chance to learn about amateur radio, radio engineering, and radio science, in addition to allowing them to participate in ham radio Science Citizen Investigation ham-site research. This is some really cool stuff. I know Nathaniel, I know him when he was here at NJIT, and it was bittersweet losing him to the University of Scranton, but I know he's doing great things over there. He also received a $1.3 million National Science Foundation grant for HamSci, and he's harnessing the power of worldwide network of licensed amateur radio operators to better understand and measure the effects of weather in the upper levels of the Earth's atmosphere. So essentially, he's studying propagation, and he is having he's doing this for a living, which is great. I'm kind of jealous, but he is he's moving on up. And I see here they have Rosie from ARDC is there, along with Nathaniel and Michelle Maldonado, who is the provost and senior vice president for academic affairs. Go Nathaniel. More stuff like that. We definitely need more stuff like that. Here's another story from Hackaday about meteors. I'm sure you know what meteors are. Well, meteors are space rocks that actually make their way to Earth, and meteorites are the space rocks that survive and they land on Earth. Usually meteors burn up in the atmosphere. So this one is talking about the UK Meteor Beacon Project, and hopes to leverage amateur radio operators and amateur radio astronomers to research more about meteors as they interact with the atmosphere. A large radio beacon, which has already been placed into service, broadcasts a circularly polarized signal into the 6-meter band, which is easily reflected back to Earth off of meteors. Specialized receivers can pick up these signals and are coordinated among a network of other receivers which stream the data they recover over the internet back to a central server. With this information, the project can determine where the meteor came from, some of the properties of meteors, and compute their trajectories by listening for the radio echoes, the pings, on that the meteors produce. While this is still in the beginning phases and information is relatively scarce, the receivers seem to be able to be built around RTL SDR modules that we've seen to be useful across a wide variety of radio projects. Really cool stuff. And of course, the RTL SDR, it was discovered, I guess, by accident, where you are using a European TV receiver, a USB receiver designed for television, and using it as a software-defined radio. That was quite a nice discovery. And it uses a chip called the RTL receiver chip. So really interesting stuff. Sable Island D Expedition was actually doing a lot of meteor scatter, and I guess there were a lot of meteors at this time. Sometimes you have like the meteor showers that produce a lot of interesting communications. And you can remember back in the old days, well, today we have computers. Back in the old days, what they did was they used tape. So you would play over and over and over a tape recording of a CQ call with your call sign, and then you can receive those pings and then slow them back down with tape, right? And then you can receive them. Today it's all computers and computer software. They use WSJTX, which is made by Joe Taylor, K1JT, and they essentially use that to produce the pings. All right, well, that is it for the news. We do news and discussion right here on Ria's Ham Shack on WRMI Legends. Let's come back with the Q&A segment. We're coming right up. All the ways to listen to Ria's Ham Shack, let me count the ways. The first and the best way is, of course, on WRMI Legends 5050 on your shortwave dial and other frequencies as appropriate. You can also listen on the podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can listen on WRMIlegends.com, where we have it on the live stream. You can catch it on Ria Ham Shack YouTube channel. Just look for youtube.com/@N2RJ. I publish a show, and it's always a few days after it airs on WRMI Legends. And if you want to get the show first, you go on WRMI Legends 5050 shortwave or on WRMIlegends.com. Of course, you can also go on WRMIlegends.com to find out ways to support the show and support the station and to keep the tubes glowing and keep the fabulous shortwave programming coming. Now back to Ria's Ham Shack. So our Q&A segment, yes, it's the one you've been waiting for. Let's start with the first question from Ham Radio / New to the Hobby, where we mentor the newbies and we get them into ham radio the right way. What are good resources for learning Morse code? So, Morse code apparently has been seeing a resurgence. And this one was asked by Bert. He's an admin on the group. I think he tried to stimulate some conversation in the group. So, what are good resources for learning Morse code? One of them, of course, I always recommend is the CW Ops. And you go to cwops.org. They have something called CW Academy, and they teach you Morse code in a classroom setting. Also good is the Long Island CW Club. That's longislandcwclub.org. You also have the Learn CW Online, LCWO, by Fabian Kurz. And he is a German radio amateur that he teaches Morse code on the website. He's a big fan of Morse code, actually. So those are ways to do it. But, once you learn the basics, you should get on the air and start making contacts. I think that's the best way to keep sharp with Morse code and to get better with Morse code. So that is good. Another question here. My garage does not have a ground. I'm going to drive a ground route outside my garage. Will that ground running from my radio and power supply cause this to be sufficient? So the answer to this is it's complicated. And long story short, you're supposed to have a ground that is bonded to your service ground in order for it to be effective. The National Electric Code requires that all grounds be bonded to the service ground, meaning that they bond to the main house ground. There are very limited exceptions to this, but a radio ground must be, and of course for antennas, must be bonded to the service ground. The reason you want to do this is you don't want to cause something called a ground loop. And a ground loop is where you have the ground being used to carry current. When you have two ground rods and they're not connected together, what happens is that you might have current from one ground flowing through the equipment to the other ground. And that's not good because that can cause damage. That's not, that's not good. All right, so Mark here asks transverter questions. I understand the principles and operations and why these are used. My question is, if we use a transverter and we say a 28 megahertz to 144 megahertz board, the 28 megahertz base unit has features and functions built in to its circuits for AGC, noise blanker, filtering, and other things. These things are designed into the base radio circuitry to modify and improve a 28 megahertz coming from the antenna and designed to work with the original radio circuits where they were engineered. Now we're adding the transverter board for the base radio antenna to alter and modify signal to bring it to 28 megahertz so the base radio can convert it to audio. Will the base radio circuits function correctly to complete their design functions on the modified signals? I see where the transverter boards list the received gain. So if the base radio is receiving a 28 megahertz signal from the transverter board, would not cause RF issues within the base radio. So the answer is that the transverter is, you could consider it as another stage to the receiver. So, the transverter actually has a number of circuits to kind of present a cleaner signal to the transceiver, right? And the transverter actually does have to have some components on the front end, for example, to amplify the incoming signals and make sure that they're good enough level. So how a transverter works. So first of all, let's back up. If you don't know what a transverter essentially is a device that's designed to take one set of frequencies and then convert them to another for use with a regular radio. For example, if you want to work the microwave bands like 1296 megahertz, which is barely a microwave band, and you don't have a radio for that band, what you can do, you can get a transverter that actually down converts the signal down to like the 2 meter band, so you can use your 2 meter radio. It's very popular among weak signal operators. And how they do this is they mix the signal, they mix the original signal with a local oscillator, and then that will result in a frequency that is down to where your radio can receive. And then your radio essentially becomes what you call an intermediate frequency radio. You know, it's similar to the concept of a super heterodyne receiver, which takes the incoming signal, mixes it down, produces an intermediate frequency, and then all the detection and processing is done on that intermediate frequency. So that's the long and short of it. Sam asks here, looking again at the digital mode HDs, stock between the Anytone A78 UV2G and the BTEC 6x2 Pro. Both are DMR, both support encryption, both are dual band and have GPS, etc. Lean towards the Anytone, Hytera as well too. So the thing about encryption, you cannot use encryption on the ham bands because it's not allowed. It's not allowed to use encryption, right? But the Anytone radios tend to be pretty good. The BTEC radios are probably pretty good too, but the Anytone seems to be a little more established in the market and a little better. But 601/2 does none of the other. To be honest, I think both will be decent radios for what you want. It's not neither here nor there. Especially with DMR, most people are using hotspots. Okay, one question is, if you have FT8, why do you also have FT4? Don't they do the same thing? Well, FT8 was designed for DXing. It was designed as a weak signal mode on HF when Joe Taylor and Steve Frank designed it. FT4 was designed more as a contest mode. It was designed to produce a very quick contact, and that could be logged quickly in a contest. And the FT4 mode as such has gained that sort of popularity. There are contests which actually have the digital modes, these weak signal digital modes. The ARRL, I think, was trying to make one, and then you have CQ Magazine making one. So FT4 actually lets you make a lot of contacts in a short time, which is great for contests. So this one is not really a question as it is a statement. Scott Ames says, I wonder how many licensed hams are too shy to pick up the mic and talk. Well, you want to know something? Talking is not the be-all and end-all of ham radio. I do spend a lot of time listening. I listen to a lot of conversation on ham radio, but not only conversation. I listen to DX. I listen to various DXpeditions working and various people, and I also listen to nets sometimes. Sometimes I listen to nets. But sometimes I just tune around to see what's out there. That in itself is a lot of the beauty of ham radio, just seeing what's out there. But there are, of course, the data modes. Remember, we talked about data modes. They're not digital modes. They're data modes. And we talked about using Morse code. So, there are a lot of hams who don't pick up a mic because they probably do other things besides picking up a mic. It is, it's a vast hobby. It's a big tent, and it's a very, very big tent. Okay, so this question is about. I have a friend who recently had a stroke. He's not good at dealing with things. His ham radio license is about to expire. He's gotten frustrated with the online renewal system of the FCC. And he's gotten so frustrated trying to renew his license, willing to let it expire. Is there any way he can get his license renewed without having to go through the FCC portal? Yes, so there are a few ways. One of them is you can go to a VE session, a volunteer examination session, or you can have a local VEC such as W5YI or another one of them handle it, and they can pretty much they can renew the license on your behalf. If you are a member of the ARRL, apparently you can call them and have them renew the license. I don't know if they still offer their service, but last I checked, they did. handyham.org might be able to help. They are an organization that seeks to empower and strengthen people with different abilities, so they are there. Yeah, and keep your ham license active. I mean, you never know when you want to use it. It's always good to keep it. All right, and this one, Robert asks here, he got back into amateur radio several years ago. Surprised to see that maximum power is 1500 watts. Remember it being at least 1800 watts in 1980 or so. Well, it might have been, I don't think it ever was 1500 watt, more than 1500 watts, but they did change the way how they measure the power. So previously, power was measured as input power, right? And input power means input power into the final amplifier stage. And that was, I think at one time it was 2000 watts. I wasn't in ham radio back then. But you have input power, and of course the output power is less. So this is input power into the final amplifier stage, as in how much the final amplifier stage will draw, how much power it will draw. And you can get, it might have been 1000 watts. So final tube output current times voltage. And today we measure something called peak envelope power. We do not use that antiquated measurement. I mean, it's probably still useful, but it's not current technology. So, yeah, so we use peak envelope power. All right, and, one person asks here, if I'm a general and I transmit on 7175, I was told that I would be breaking the rules. Why can't I transmit single sideband on 7175? Well, so the band limits that you have at any licensee are that you must keep your entire emission within the specified bands. And how you do that is that you have to take into account the bandwidth of your transmission. So if your transmission is, let's say, on single sideband, you want to leave at least 3 kilohertz away from the band edge. If you're on lower sideband, that signal will extend below your dial frequency. And if you're upper sideband, then that will extend above your dial frequency. So yes, so you're able to do that. You're able to transmit only when you're away from the band edge. In my book, I said the band edge is is a dangerous place to be because, you always run the risk of transmitting out of band, right? And I know the ARRL official observers used to look there, but also the new volunteer monitors, they do that as well. So it's very easy to go out of band. I think that you need to be very careful. Okay. All right. So this question is about UTC, and I can tell you a lot about UTC and time zones. I deal with multiple time zones. So the question is that this person is in the in Indianapolis, and it's now 9:40 p.m. in Indianapolis. So so the United States is a little interesting with time zones because we have a few different time zones, right? We have the Eastern time, we have Central time, we have Mountain Daylight time, we have Mountain Standard time. I'll explain that one. We have Pacific Daylight time, Alaska Daylight time, Hawaii Aleutian Daylight Time, Hawaii Standard Time. So we have something called daylight savings, but I'll explain that in a minute. So we have Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, Alaska, Hawaii Aleutian, and Hawaii Standard Time. Eastern Time is in the Eastern U.S., and it is UTC, and UTC time essentially is the time at the Greenwich Observatory in Greenwich, England, at 0 degrees longitude, so to speak. The Central Time typically, so Eastern Time is typically based in New York. Central Time is typically based in Chicago. Mountain Time, Standard Mountain Time, is based in Salt Lake City. But Arizona, the state, does not observe daylight saving time. So there's a different mountain time for them. They're always on Mountain Standard Time. Pacific Time is Los Angeles, of course, West Coast, California, Oregon, and Washington. Alaska is Anchorage. Hawaii Aleutian, Adak in, or I don't know how to pronounce it, Adak, Alaska, and then you have Hawaii, Honolulu. So all of these have different offsets from UTC, and if you're in a particular time zone, you normally add the, if you're west of Greenwich, you add the offset. So here in Eastern Daylight Time, Daylight Saving Time, we add 4 hours. When we go Standard Time, we go back. We fall back in the fall, so we're in Standard Time, and that is 5 hours difference. So essentially, this person is asking, they're in Indianapolis, and I believe Indianapolis is in Central Time, right? So if they're in Central Time, they would be, there's Central Time, and they would be right now UTC -5, so they add 5 hours. So if they're 9:40 p.m., they would be 9 plus 5, 14, 40, so they'll be 0240 UTC. Right, and that's all there is to it. So there's no daylight saving time in UTC. UTC is just UTC. Coordinated Universal Time. It's a worldwide time standard precisely because we have so many time zones, and it's always good to have something that everybody can refer to. Usually, of course, you as a shortwave listener, if you're not listening on the podcast, if you're listening on shortwave, you will know that UTC time is where it's at. So yeah, it's a 24-hour clock, right? If you're new to shortwave, you learn something, okay? All right, looking for recommendations on antenna mounting on a Jeep Wrangler 2-meter, 70-centimeter band. So, with a Jeep, you have a few options. You can mount it on the fender or the hood using a clamp, a spare tire mount, and you can do a spring mount on the side of the back. A lot of people use springs, they have to drill the body, of course. But the front fender mount seems to be the most practical. It screws under the hood so you don't really see the holes, and you get them to see there. I mean, a lot of, Jeep people, they kind of have a set of different standards of what it is to make their vehicles look nice. And they could place it in a number of different places, right? Some people also use like trailer hitch mounts. They mount on a spare tire. They mount to the side. And then they have it on a lot of different places. In a Jeep, one of the considerations in a Jeep, of course, is you're going off-road and you want to put, I think the spring is a good idea because if you're off-road and you roll the Jeep, like some people do, you probably won't damage the antenna, but you probably end up damaging the Jeep unless you have like a roll cage. Oh well, I don't have a Jeep. I have a Tesla, so I'm not going off-road with that thing. So here is a question from Bob Lucas. I spend most of my time on 20 or 40 CW, But listening HFSSB, especially local, I'm surprised at the huge interest in GMRS. It's almost a new ham radio. And then why are so many people interested in GMRS? Well, I'll tell you the good things about GMRS. Number one is you can talk commercial content, right? You're not restricted in content as ham radio. Two, one license, if you care to get a license, is sufficient for your entire family, meaning not only your brother or your sister, but your wife or your husband or whoever, or your kids. It's good for uncles and aunts and such like that, I believe. No, sorry, it's just siblings and in-laws. I don't believe it goes to uncles and aunts. And then, it's becoming very popular with the overlanding crowd. It's becoming very popular with the Jeeple, so to speak. So the Jeeple are doing GMRS. And it's also good to have as an emergency radio. So the highlights are you can have, I believe, 5 watts of power. You can have 50 watts on mobile stations, and you can have 15 watts on fixed station. That's your base station. That's the main channels. On the interstitial channels, you do not exceed 5 watts. So I think for many people, GMRS is all the radio comms they need. I have a video on a GMRS license. That thing has over 150,000 views, I think, now. I was surprised it became so popular, but GMRS is what it is. Is it the new ham radio or the new CB? I would say it's a new CB. It's actually what CB was intended to be. CB was intended to be a local radio service where people talk to each other locally and not for DXing or anything like that. So CB is, unfortunately, CB, the genie is out of the bottle. You got the skip, and you can't tell people that they can't shoot skip. But, the good thing is a lot of them eventually became ham radio operators, and they're interested in ham radio, which is a good thing. You get the communications bug. So many people got it from CB. Although I didn't get my start in CB radio, I got my start on shortwave listening, which is the other way that people get into ham radio. So this question here is about, has anyone ever thought about starting a Hamfest on the air or HODA? Might be a good way to promote the hobby in our Hamfest. Well, believe it or not, people do actually trade equipment on the air. And by trade equipment on the air, I mean that they don't actually send the equipment through the air. Of course not. What they do is they will advertise for sale on the air, and then somebody meets them up and pays them and takes the equipment from them or takes it for free. This is one of the exceptions in the United States rules for amateur radio, where you can offer amateur equipment for sale over the air occasionally. You can't do it regularly. You can't make it like a business either. You have to do it as personally trade equipment over the air. And you can get, sell your equipment to another person. You can buy equipment. Several radio clubs have what you call a swap and shop net. So every so often, maybe once a week or once a month, they would get together on the air, and then people would say, well, I have a radio to sell, and and then somebody else say, well, I'm interested, and then they meet offline and they finalize a transaction. There's one club in New York City that I used to listen to that had it. That was the Kings County Repeater Association, KCRA, just KC2RA is their call sign. And they had a number of different interesting nets. So you find that these swap and shop nets are pretty interesting. But, however, they are not really in vogue anymore because most people go online to sell their equipment. So it's not really, it's not really easy to sustain that kind of thing anymore. It's new technology takes away of old, but sometimes it's not really that bad. So Hey, what can I say? Well, my friends, it's been another Ria's Ham Shack. This is a pretty interesting one for me. I'm going to be around, of course, a lot of, for a lot of different things in amateur radio. And next week, you'll get to find out what I'm going to be doing. Okay? I promise you, it's going to be a pretty exciting one. Going to help shape the future of amateur radio. And it's going to be pretty nice. As always, if you'd like to QSL the show, you can QSL the show in several ways. You can send an email to ria@n2rj.com. That's Romeo India Alpha at November 2 RomeoJuliet.com. You can send postal mail to P.O. Box 73, Sussex. That's Sierra Uniform Sierra Sierra Echo X-Ray, New Jersey 07461. And I will reply to you with a QSL card. I'm actually printing a special card for Ria's Ham Shack right here on WRMI Legends. Of course, if you would like to support the show, the best way to support the show is to go on to WRMIlegends.com. There are several options there that you can show your support. You can support the show. You can keep the tubes glowing and keep the fabulous programming on WRMI Legends going. So those are great ways to support the show. And, like I said, I do this for you. I do this for the community. I love doing this. I love making a radio show. And I love doing it especially on shortwave radio. Because, as I mentioned with my congressman, Josh Gottheimer, he is using this AM radio issue to draw attention to some of these things. And I do think that it's unfortunate that audio manufacturers are dropping their AM radios, when AM is so useful. And this is AM, okay? It's shortwave, but it's AM. It's good radio to have. So, yeah. Well, it's been another Ria's Ham Shack. Like I said, the news from me leaving the ARRL really isn't bad news. First of all, let me tell you, nobody forced me to leave, okay? Some people are under the illusion that they got me to leave. The answer is no. I ended up doing it myself because, number one, I was looking for a change from the environment at Newington. It was getting a little wearing on me, one. And then two, I've also decided to take another opportunity. So yeah, that's the straight dope direct for me. I don't think, you can get any better than that. Yeah, life goes on. So I do like to remind you, you can also check out the YouTube channel at youtube.com/@n2rj. youtube.com/@n2rj. We're posting a lot of great videos, and I'm going to be posting even more videos. Let me know what you want to see. You can always leave a comment on the YouTube channel. A lot of great community over there, and a lot of great things going on in ham radio. Yeah, if I wanted to get rich, I would get into ham radio stuff. Oh boy, no, I do this for the fun of it. I do it for the fun of it because I love ham radio. I love you all, my audience. All right, so that is it for Ria's Ham Shack for another week. I am Ria Jarm, N2RJ. And you know what I always say? First of all, to my friends in the Ukraine, I hope you're hanging tough and staying strong. And I hope that things are going well for you in taking back your country. And everybody else, peace and 73. This is Ria, N2RJ. See ya.